Good evening. Thanks for joining us. High school athletes across the state cannot accept compensation tied to their name, image, or likeness.
Big issue today. The WIAA rejected a proposal to change that, despite more than 30 other states right now allowing for so-called NIL deals. We begin tonight with a first alert update as Jason Zimmerman attended today's meeting and asked what's next.
High school athletes in Wisconsin hoping to cash in on their name, image, or likeness will now have to wait after a vote by WIAA members in Stevens Point Wednesday morning, which rejected a proposal by just 49 votes, giving the green light to NIL deals.
Number of schools or representatives supporting the motion today, 170. Those denying, 219. The motion does not pass.
Those supporting a change say it's best for the organization to establish its own rules rather than allowing for the state legislature or a court to weigh in. However, those voting no argue there's still too many questions surrounding compensation rules.
I do not feel equipped as an athletic director to help my student athletes and my parents navigate this rule accurately.
If we elect to say no, we will open the door for one of the three branches of government to force it upon us on their terms, putting us into a state of being reactive. And once that happens, there is no going back.
If passed, student athletes would have been prohibited from using their school's branding, but not their own. This issue is not going away, according to WIAA officials, who plan to continue to address it with their members and possibly put it back on the agenda next year.
We had nearly half of our membership say that they were ready for a change. So clearly that tells me that this conversation is not over. We need to get back to the membership, especially those who voted no, to ask them what were their specific concerns.
31 other states, including Minnesota and Illinois, allow deals for NIL. Reporting in Stevens Point, Jason Zimmerman, Action 2 News.